Hi, I'm Ben. I live near Oxford. I have been fairly building for the web since about 96, 97. I joined as number 2 a neural/semantic next startup called Dendril in 99. I've worked for West Coast companies pretty much ever since. I currently work for Vercel. I joined over 4 years ago when we were just 40 people in 26 countries. We are now 15 times that size. We've had incredible growth. And I know that many of you, I think, are probably familiar with Next.js, which is one of the things that we built. But I think a lot of people also don't really know that much about us. So keep on thinking I'll get a discount at the Apple Store. Hasn't happened yet. This is the joys of having a very humorous teenage girl who sat me in the garden and made all that happen one day. Anyway. Like I said, I work for Vercel, but this is not a talk about Vercel, but I think that the journey that we've gone through is incredibly interesting, and I hope for many of you will be very, very relatable. So in case you're not familiar, Vercel, we create JavaScript frameworks, which is pretty niche. It's pretty cool. There's not that many people out there doing it. We also then create the developer tooling, the managed infrastructure that then allows people to get these in front of people at a global scale. We did create Next.js, but we also have in our engineering teams some of the most remarkable people. If you're a front-end developer, Tobias, who made Webpack, I mean, this effectively is what water is to fish, Webpack is to front-end dev for many people. He works with us. Rich and most of the core team is Svelte. They work in our engineering teams. Shad Cien, I mean, if you're a modern front-end developer or if you have kids, he is the most remarkable UI person that we've ever come across, but also some of the core React team. So back in the Facebook days, 3 of the 5 founders of the React core team actually work in our engineering teams as well. So it's a remarkable group. What's beautiful, though, is open source. Staggering amounts of investment goes into things that we then give away back to the community for free. What we get back is staggering levels of feedback, which I would say, as it's going to come through this talk, the feedback that we get from our users, from our open source users, that all of you get from your customer users, internal, external, I think is probably one of the most staggeringly important things that you are going to need for this next wave of how we're all going to generate software, fundamentally. So, in case you're not familiar with Next.js, it's by far the most popular framework for building front-end experiences in React. It's got nearly 1.5 million monthly active users. Thousands of people's contributed to it as well, not just us. And like I said, that feedback and that iteration is what's massively helped us as we go. So, I think it's safe to say, and by the way, the clock isn't counting down, whoever's running the clock. So I have no idea where we're going with stuff. So I think it's safe to say that AI is changing software. I think it's safe to say that as developers and engineers, it's already made fairly significant changes to us. A year ago, there was a Stack Overflow survey, and ultimately 82% of respondents said that they were using AI tools on a regular basis. A year ago is a long time in AI. Next, though, I think actually the biggest change is the way that AI has changed the use of software for end users, for everyday people in the street. So I would say that the bit where ChatGPT took, let's face it, using AI mainstream, you know, they're run to 100 million users in 3 months, is pretty staggering. Might well be, we might well never see the equivalent of that ever again, potentially, something like that. As a family, we became Perplexity first about 18 months ago, when my son, who went on his own to Nicaragua, 17-year-old, did all of his planning using Perplexity. I would hasten to add, as with all AI tooling, as a parent, when you consider the risk of the execution of the information that the AI gives you, you have to verify. Trust somewhat, verify mostly. 17-year-old boy traveling, well, effectively, would go boarding down a volcano in Nicaragua. I did an awful lot of external validation that all the stuff he was doing was appropriate. So I would say incredibly liberating, trust but verify in almost everything that we do, fundamentally. I also think a final last thing here, and I'm sure you're already thinking about it, is that the agentic discovery of your information via your public websites, your documentation, your tutorials, is staggeringly important. If you don't have a Tiger team looking at this already, you are probably late, but you need to get on with it. So I think it's incredibly likely that the agentic discovery of your content is going to be how you end up being discovered going forwards. So if you think of what Google was, 15 odd years ago, I would say we're now in an era where you need to make sure that your data is very much positioned so people can find it. So obviously, things are changing. Things are changing unbelievably quickly. I studied physics, so in the very early 90s, I was doing high-energy physics research. I was using data from CERN, and if you know your history, 1991, CERN is where, Sir Tim Berners-Lee effectively did the first ever web page. I've had the joy of seeing the birth of the web, the birth of mobile, the birth of the responsive. This has that same massive sense of the world has just changed. I think the biggest difference is the pace of change is now staggering. It felt fast back then, but if I compare, again, that run to 100 million in 3 months for the adoption of an AI tool is mind-blowing. The adoption of the iPhone took significantly longer, even though when you look back, it clearly redefined the world and how we work at these things. So I would say it's definitely no longer a question of if AI will transform your business, but it's going to be how can you and your businesses maintain your competitive advantage. I mean, fundamentally, I would say we see lots of people, we run a lot of hackathons. We see a lot of people who kind of come just to play, and I think playing is a great way to learn, but I think that for you and your businesses, the most essential thing is that you need to find something which is enhancing what your business does already, ideally staying true to the values, staying true to the things that you already exist for, rather than suddenly randomly tangenting or something like this. And fundamentally, on this journey, Vercel went through this. There's a point in late 2022, ChatGPT comes out, and by the way, it was a Next.js application for those first 100 million users, and we sat down as a team and just went, well, how do we fit into this world? And this is where the photograph comes from. We make JavaScript frameworks. What should we do? So, well, we built a framework to build AI tooling with. This was our first foray into this brand new world, and ultimately, it very much aligns with our business, as you can imagine. Again, it's a slightly unusual business. I'm not saying that you should all go and build AI frameworks, but this was where our natural intrinsic skills, and like I said, the engineering talent that we had was aligned with that as well. We then effectively had this AI SDK, and if you've not used it, npm i AI is how you get to it. It is Vercel agnostic, it is open source, it is used an awful lot. A year ago, it was having 150,000 monthly downloads. We're now at 1.5 million weekly downloads. And if you're looking to either get started or to refine the way that you work, I'd say it's an amazing way to start. Again, open source, fill your boots. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing to get involved with. And also, you can change the model that your code uses in a single line. And there's something at the end of the talk I'm going to mention. I think this is incredibly relevant as well. So, LLMs can do function calling. JavaScript functions can therefore be called by LLMs, and React is just JavaScript. So in our internal teams, we have a thing called demo days. Every Friday afternoon, effectively, anybody in the business can go and pretty much demo anything they've done. Summer of 2023, one of our team, the trouble with looking backwards is things seem really, really obvious. But if you can picture what the world was like in summer of 2023, effectively, ChatGPT was text goes in, text comes out. Then we had Midjourney, text goes in, images come out. And ultimately, on that demo day, somebody's internal name was called WebJourney, and it was text goes in, React components come out. And again, it kind of seems obvious today, but that led to us launching in beta, only on Twitter. We don't really do a great deal of marketing, but we do a lot of Twittering. Effectively, we launched a thing called V0, which, based on the people I've spoken with at this event so far, almost nobody has heard of, apparently, even though we do have millions of users. Out of curiosity, how many of you are already using this? Great, it's like 7 people. So there we go. Maybe we should hire a marketing team or something like that. Effectively, the amazing thing through Dev Twitter, though, was that we mentioned that we were going to try and build something. And we actually did a very early beta launch, and it wasn't anything like the product that you will see today, but we had 100,000 people sign up on the waitlist in 3 days, which, if you can imagine being the people that look after our roadmap and our resourcing, that's quite a shock to the system. You know, how on earth would you possibly adapt within your organization if you suddenly have that level of interest for something that you were just curious to see if anybody actually was interested in whatsoever? So ultimately, it allows you, again, natural English query. It supports English, so it does do Spanish, but that's possibly because our founder is Argentinian, and we have a lot of multilingual going on as well. So fundamentally, English goes in, and React components come out, or entire full-stack applications. The thing that is marginally different, I think, in how we've gone about it initially, is that initially tooling, it wasn't actually really aimed at the developer audience. It was actually aimed at rapid prototyping for product teams, like product managers. So instead of writing a PRD, they could effectively just describe. So instead of putting English language into a PRD, they would use English language to start prototyping something on their own. And then we also find that designers found it incredibly liberating as well. So instead of going from a static design that you will know from one of the very well-known design toolings, they could literally start to build interactive, animated, fully fledged interactive JavaScript components as well. It is now available via API. You can also use it in Cursor as a model if you so wish.
And if you're enjoying this, LeadDev has a ton more to offer.
I'm quite fond of the articles.
I feel like LeadDev blogs are my favorite, and it's been really, really useful to kind of create these more meaningful connections as well.
If there's something you're struggling with as an engineering leader, there's a pretty good chance that LeadDev has published something that addresses it.
So make sure you check out leaddev.com.
I think at the heart of everything that's happened in the last couple of years is almost one thing which, again, looking back, it seems incredibly simple, which was once upon a time, there was a very small number of people in the world who were doing anything in the world of ML, machine learning. I would say it was down to probably, maybe a few thousand people, most of whose first name was probably doctor or professor, who were fundamentally doing staggeringly complex work that was very, very hard for any of us to consider to be attainable. Today, anybody who knows how to make a request against an API can effectively trigger the use of a foundation model that's being run somewhere else. So we've gone from effectively very complex to implement and to build and to deploy to incredibly trivial to actually leverage in our workflows. I'd say the overall stack has changed rather a lot. Obviously, it's kind of gone from distinctly academic to distinctly interactive. It's kind of gone from Python-ish to TypeScript-ish. It's gone from thousands of very, very deep specialists on a research perspective to, from our experience, tens of millions of people leveraging it to change the experiences for their end users, and things like shipping speeds. It would take between 3, 6, 12, 9 months to get anything out the door in the old world. We now run hackathons. We actually ran a thing with NVIDIA. We ran a thing called the world's shortest hackathon. And effectively, we've actually had a hackathon that was like 20 minutes in length and still had meaningful outputs. I was at Dubai for the IA Festival. We ran a 2-hour hackathon. And the people that came second were a group of product managers who have actually never really shipped anything before then. And they just found the entire experience incredibly liberating. So I think the next fundamental thing is that in the new AI landscape, the entire of the playing field is leveled. So what does that mean for us? What it means is you probably, instead of focusing on deep AI learning within your teams, should probably focus on leveraging those AI tools for what your business was already excelling at. And so you will more than likely, if your business has any level of success, you will have some level of exclusive data. You will have people using your team. You will have internal researchers. You will have internal documentation. You will notionally have, if you think of whenever somebody joins the company where you work, I'm hoping there's a large library of information that only people who work there can actually get hold of. So number one is exclusive data, a complicated domain. I suspect that most of you already work in this because it's very hard to build a business that isn't already a complicated domain. E-commerce is complicated, publishing companies is complicated, insurance is complicated. So I would think you're there already. And feedback cycles, I mentioned earlier, is immensely important. LLMs undergo massive pre-training. I imagine that many of you are somewhat familiar. I'm currently reading a brilliant book called Build Your Own LLM from Scratch. It's GP2 level. And what I've discovered is that it's way more accessible than I ever imagined it was going to be. This is very much a fun evening project. But fundamentally, LLMs undergo massive pre-training. But they are limited by the scope of the training data, as massive as it was. And they're also limited by time. They've almost always got a cutoff date. So in terms of the new world, in terms of your teams, these are the new mainstays of what you have to work with. Prompt engineering, fine-tuning, RAG, and evals. So in terms of prompt engineering, this is just us giving our own bespoke instructions into a general-purpose model such that it then is following what it is that your business cares about, what you want your customers to care about. Fine-tuning, a little bit more involved. This is secondary training done on an existing foundation model. For something like this, you will probably be using, I imagine, one of the fairly more involved platforms like Hugging Face or Bedrock. This one is pretty involved. I would say it's non-trivial to implement from that perspective. RAG is just the equivalent of giving the models more data than they had at the beginning. So if you think in terms of, it's almost like search. It's almost like internal search to give it more data than it had at the point of training. So going back to our list, we're kind of into the next one. We said earlier that you already have the data that is proprietary to your business. Now, fundamentally, if you then combine that with RAG, you are then going to start exposing that internal information that was never available to those foundation models. Even though this is a relatively straightforward step, it's a staggeringly important thing for you to do in terms of making sure that the outputs are very much in line with the business value that you already provided, but externalizing it in other ways. Dave and Ruth are the two founders of this whole event. We were having a drink last night, and we're just talking about how he can possibly expose the incredible data that lead dev has had for the last 10 years in a format that best suits this audience and the audience that's been here for the last 10 years. And effectively repurposing that internal proprietary information. Could be transcriptions of every talk that's ever been done. It could be the feedback surveys where everything was done. I think is essentially important too. Now then, moving on to, I suppose, what almost to me feels like the most gnarly and awkward change, which is evals. So once upon a time, I'm going to say software was simple. It wasn't really simple, but it was deterministic, or at least it mostly was. There were emergent chaoses that came out of it, by and large. We kind of got used to the idea that if you do the same thing repeatedly, you get the same results repeatedly. And off the back of that, we would do things like unit testing. And if you're a TDD person, you would find that if you had an issue, the first thing you would do is you would build the test that fails, and then you would go and fix it. But in the modern world of AI, you can ask it the exact same thing repeatedly and get different answers every single time. So evals is a fundamental step change, which is you can no longer assume that the same inputs lead to the same outputs. I've been a people manager for over 20 years. Human beings are non-deterministic as well, right? So I would say that fundamentally there's a very good reason why we have incredibly intense feedback loops built into all management. We will probably, most of us, all do weekly one-to-ones. I hope we're all doing at least annual or biannual proper serious reviews. The entire idea, I think, of management has the single guiding principle, which is no surprises. We're now in a world where you can run your software and it can surprise you time after time after time. In this spirit of this world, we end up with this kind of natural weekly cycle. So you build, you kind of do vibe or user checking. I think the word vibe has been a little bit bandied around for different reasons moderately recently. But from a user perspective, in this instance, I actually don't mean the end user just yet. I mean, if there is any opportunity to dog food within your organization, please get that happening. Find ways to open up all of your tooling internally. So within our organization, fundamentally, the V0 team use the AI SDK. And as they were building the V0 initial products, they were giving feedback straight into the AI SDK about things that we could then improve. That then went into the platform team that then helped us to deploy it. So there's a beautiful little kind of triumvirate of feedback just in there. I don't know how readable this is, but this is Chris Tate. So on the day that we had our first ever internal alpha of an API for V0, Chris is an amazing individual. And I know he's West Coast, and ultimately I'm obviously based over here. So I know that he was still hacking away at 1 o'clock in the morning his time, because I was just starting work at my day, and he literally built, for fun in his evening, his first code editor implementation of using our API within it. And you can kind of see there, literally, this is the stuff I live for, he says. So get in the hands of people, anybody who is the most relevant people. The next one, and try not to cringe at the number of tabs, which gives me shivers. I almost didn't include this. I almost actually edited this in Photoshop just to get rid of those. But effectively, this is Pran using our tool. Pran is a senior designer within our company. And in that beautiful, beautiful way, which is this is Pran using V0 to redesign the next design for V0. So it is one of those things which is in the process of doing that design, you very quickly find what doesn't work. And let's face it, if it doesn't work for you, it probably won't work for other people as well. So I think these are rather cracking. We did a thing called the State of AI not that long ago, and fundamentally this is Nicholas, who's from AKQA. His observation is that we are radically changing the dynamic. We're changing the dynamic between all of EPD. To my mind, I think we're coalescing the roles. I think you are blurring. I mean, there's a point where we kind of went from back end to front end and then full stack, but this is like full team. So this is everybody in the organization contributing at different levels, and I think the baton that we hand off, I think, has radically changed shape, and I think this is a very exciting time to be alive, just from this perspective, because I think cross-functional collaboration is amazing. So, final part of this one is this is the slightly bigger one. So, in a more monthly scope, what we do is actually ignore the monthly scope is where we make big changes. Every single day, there is a member of the V0 team who goes into an internal Slack channel called Feedback V0. Every single thumb up or thumb down that is listed by anybody is fed into there. Every single textual response that goes into that is read by somebody in the V0 team every single day. What's the nicest way to say what I'm going to say? Many of our users were very impassioned. And you could rate the level of how much they cared by how many times they dropped the F-bomb. The record today is we had one piece of feedback that had 27 uses of the F-bomb with them describing how they'd like us to change our product. So we go through this every day, and off the back of that, we fundamentally make updates to our prompts. We make updates to our evals. We have an auto-fix model as well that we tweak as well. And we do this. I'm not saying we make those changes every day, but we certainly read every single day everything that happens. We probably should put a swear filter on it, this kind of stuff. The final thing I think that this almost triggers from my perspective is the thing that we have learned as an organization is ship things that are imperfect. We've always had an incredibly high bar. We've actually previously delayed ships because the open graph image on the release note was considered not to be quite right, and we've delayed a ship by 20 minutes while somebody went and fixed that. In this instance, it was very much realizing the pace of everything is massively upped. You can't really wait an extra day in many cases because the world is moving so rapidly. You can't wait to view the feedback, and you can't wait to make the changes. So we actually, as a V0 team, they did an epic thing, which now, from us, feels like the most natural thing in the world, but they set themselves the challenge of a 100-day release streak, which they achieved. Actually, they aimed to do 100 releases in 100 days. They actually missed one day, but they did 2 releases the next day to catch up for it. So they kind of got this muscle memory going to the point where now daily releases, multiple daily releases, are now completely normal with the organization, but that is a muscle memory that you had to stretch and push yourselves. So we've kind of gone through the main 3 points I mentioned earlier, fit in with how your business works, fit in with what makes sense to your business. My last point that I would just mention is the pace of change of the foundation models means try to make sure that whoever wins, you still win. So, I remember the point where, was it Claude 3.7 was then kind of superseded by most of my friends. Gemini 2.5 Flash was kind of the winner, and then Claude came out with 4.0. Try and ensure that wherever you're operating, whatever you're doing, that whoever wins the arms race this week for foundation models or frontier models, that you are still successful yourselves. We did the State of AI report, came out, I think, about a month and a half ago, and one page from this was just, at that point in time, people were saying that on average, they are changing providers at least twice every 6 months. Try to make sure that you make that as seamless as possible. Again, I did mention there's an SDK that can make that really, really simple for you. But also, I think, trying to plug yourselves into the community at large. Because, effectively, I don't think that all of us can necessarily afford to invest 8 hours a day on just catching up what's going on. So learn from our peers, share about it all with each other. And again, frankly, Blue Sky and Dev Twitter, I think, are actually being quite useful right now. These are links to our documentation. I think my final observation is what a time to be alive. I feel staggeringly privileged that I got to see the birth of the web, the birth of mobile, frankly, the birth of AI in its current format. I think all of us in this room are in a position where I think we're going to have the time of our lives. I think I'm having an amazing time. I hope you guys do too. And finally, I'm Ben. My email address, Twitter, and Blue Sky. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you very much.